أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ورفع أبويه على العرش وخروا له سجدا وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي إن ربي لطيف لما يشاء إنه هو العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Once again everyone, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I try to continue whatever I've come to learn about ayah number 100 of Surah Yusuf. What I talked to you about in the last session was the portion of the ayah وَرَفَعَ أَبَوَيْهِ عَلَى الْعَرْشِ وَخَرُّوا لَهُ سُجَّدًا وَقَالَ يَا أَبَتِ هَذَا تَأْوِيلُ رُؤْيَايَ مِنْ قَبْلِ قَدْ جَعَلَهَا رَبِّي حَقًّا. So that's about halfway through the ayah. He raised his parents onto the throne and they fell before him in prostration. And he said, my beloved father, this is the interpretation of my vision from so long ago. Certainly Allah has already made it, materialized it to be true and to become a reality. That's what we discussed last time. And so I'm going to translate the rest of this for you and then we'll discuss it. وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ بِي إِذْ أَخْرَجَنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ. And he has been beautiful and good to me. He has been excellent to me. And he was excellent to me when he brought me out of the prison. وَجَاءَ بِكُم مِّنَ الْبَدْوِ. And he brought all of you from the outskirts. وَمِن بَعْدِ أَن نَزَغَ الشَّيْطَانُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ إِخْوَتِي. Even after the devil had caused a provocation between myself and my brothers. إِنَّ رَبِّي لَطِيفٌ لِمَا يَشَاءُ. No doubt my master is subtle and intricate in whatever he decides to do or whatever he wills. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. Certainly he is the all-knowing, all-wise. Okay, so that there's a few statements here, and we're going to start with وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ بِي إِذْ أَخْرَجَنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ. And he was good to me when he brought me out of the prison. The thing to note here is, first of all, this is still a continuation of what he's saying to his father. So he's on the throne. The father and mother are now also on the throne. He turns to his father and said, Allah has made this dream come true. And then he's continuing to speak to father, and he says, now there's a lot to share. This is the first conversation they're having after decades of separation. There's so much to catch up on. There's so many tears to cry. And there's so much to lament over. So much time has been lost. But the first words that come out of his mouth are words of gratitude. All the negative that has taken place hasn't been erased. But he understands that all that negative pales in comparison to the favor Allah has just done to him. This favor is massive to him. And he now understands that he needs to look back at all of it. And now, instead of focusing on the bad things that happen, and we spent most of the time in this surah discussing the bad things that happened to him. There's plenty of them. Not one of them comes up. He says, وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ بِي إِذْ أَخْرَجَنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ. And he was good to me. My master was beautiful and good to me. He was excellent towards me. And he did good by me when he brought me out of the prison. But then the thing is, what did he not mention? What else did he not mention? He didn't say he was good to me when my brothers didn't kill me. He was good to me when he brought me out of a well. He was good to me when he took me out of slavery and he at least gave me a safe home to be in. He was good to me when he proved the slander wrong. He was good to me when, I was in prison, but I still had an opportunity to do da'wah, etc. Those are a mix of good and bad in all of those situations. But there's a lot of things that he skipped. He didn't mention the years that he spent in jail. Why specifically is he going towards he's good to me when he brought me out of prison? Well, scholars have a few opinions about that. The first of them, and most glaringly, instead of talking about the well, because he's in two dark places in the story, right? He was in the well, and then he was in the prison. Bringing up the well would bring up an embarrassing part of the past for the brothers that are now in the audience, yes? And he's already said to them, "La tathriba alaykum al-yawm," no harm and no shaming shall come upon you since from this day on. So even bringing up Allah was good to me when I was rescued from the well would be like, oh my God, he brought up the well, right? So dad never knew about the well. Now he's going to ask about the well. He didn't even bring up the well because he knew that would embarrass the brothers. And so that's one reason that's been postulated why he didn't bring up, the well, the first time he was in a dark place. The additional thing is Allah was good to me even though I was in jail. No, because if he brings up him going into jail, then the minister's wife, who's also been exonerated, who's made tawbah, and all of that's been cleared, unnecessarily digging up that dirt again, unnecessarily bringing that up again. What does he choose to highlight? This is where I'm going to go directly to what I understand to be the most plausible explanation for the things he chose to say, because what he chose to say is very brief. He's recounting Allah's favor on him, and he highlighted two things of all the things that have happened. He highlighted two things. Listen to this. He says, he brought me out of jail. Allah pulled me out of prison, and he brought you. Now he's not talking to dad anymore. He's talking to everybody because kum is you all, the plural. So he's talking to his brothers. He's talking to their families, all of them that are in the audience. He says, Allah was good to me when he brought me out of jail, and Allah was good to me. My master was good to me when he brought all of you from the open desert, from the wild lands. Badu, like Bedouins we say in English. It's an incorporated word from the Arabic word badu, and badu comes from the original verb bada. Bada means to be exposed. People that live out in the wilderness, or they have barely any kind of architecture to protect themselves from the elements, and are mostly herding sheep, or they're nomad people and they're traveling people. They are constantly exposed to the sky, and that environment is called badu, the exposed environment, right? So the undeveloped part of the world and the Bedouin lifestyle is actually called badu. So he's using that word and says he brought you all the way from the outskirts, the boonies. We say in America, we say the boonies, the out there. He brought you from the wilderness even. And, so why would he say this particular? So we understand brought me out of prison. But why even connect that to he brought all of you from the boonies, from the village, from the backwards country, etc. Well, this has been, again, lots of discussion about it, and the most common opinion postulated about this is that he's saying, look at how Allah has done a favor not only to me and given me all this position and provided for me now and given me security and given me an opportunity to do good. In this time of famine and difficulty, he brought all of you and your families out of a situation where you barely had enough food to eat, and he's brought you out of the undeveloped part of the country or a region, and he's brought you to the civilized capital of the world. So he brought you into civilization, because Egypt was the civilized capital of the world, right? So it's what's called moving on up, right? So there's upwards mobility for you. You've got a much better life here now, and that he doesn't even say that as a favor to them. It's interesting. He says that's a favor to himself. Allah was good to me when he brought me out of jail, and Allah was good to me when he brought all of you out of the wilderness into here. In other words, he sees good coming to his family as a favor Allah has done to himself. As a larger extension, we notice in the Quran when we talk about gratitude, we don't just thank Allah for the good that he's done to us. So ربي أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي. Master, empower me to thank you for the favor you've done to me and to both my parents. In other words, there are places in the Quran where you have the inspired dua that the favor to your parents is also a favor to you. Think of it this way, and we'll just talk about parents for a moment, even though he's not only talking to his parents, he's talking to the extended family. I, for example, came to the United States with my family. If my father wasn't positioned here to do work here, I would never have come here. If I never came here, I wouldn't have ever had the opportunities that I had here. I would have never studied Arabic the way that I did. I would have never studied the Quran the way that I did. I would have never met the friends that I had that had so much influence on my life and shaped the way that I think about my religion. Some of the most remarkable teachers that influenced my life. That none of that would have happened if my father wasn't working here and he wasn't, working night and day to basically provide for us. in a very expensive part of the world in New York City, where we weren't, wealthy at all. But so the favors Allah has done to me are actually only a continuation of the favors already Allah did to my father, giving him the opportunity to do something for his family, and so they can have a better life, or they can have opportunities that even he didn't have, right? So first and foremost, what Yusuf alayhi salam is teaching us is that a favor or goodness coming to your family, and not just your elders, even your younger sibling. He's talking to his brothers, he's talking to his sisters-in-law, he's talking to his nieces and nephews, all of them. And good coming to them is good done to me. This is a mindset change for a lot of people, because in extended families, in large families, unfortunately, there's a lot of politics. So when good happens to one cousin, they get a promotion, they get a new job, they buy a house, they get a new car. All the other cousins are like, oh, yeah, I don't even know why somebody would give them a promotion. You've seen him? You've seen her? Like there's a jealousy, and there's almost a, why did they move up? Right? They don't see that as a favor done to the family, because they still see them as another. They're family, but they're not quite family. And there's always this subtle competition. Even if you invite people over, not nowadays, but back in the day, right? If you invite somebody over for a barbecue, man, they did this. We're going to do a better job. It's like a competition all the time. Why did they have this and we didn't have that? Why did their birthday party look better than my kid's birthday party, et cetera, et cetera? We get petty and we get competitive. And look at Yusuf alayhi salam sitting in that position. He actually acknowledges Allah's favor on all of them, that now all of them don't have to worry about food. All of them don't have to worry about shelter. And you know what happens, right? When the economy tanks and there's scarcity of food and supplies, because remember the last time the family came, they literally brought used items from the home to give in exchange for food. So they were basically destitute at this point, right? And when that happens in a society, crime goes up. So it's not only that they're starving, they're also not safe. The danger goes up when economies collapse. So he's grateful to Allah that not only has Allah made him safe, but he's given all of them safety too. And also now this gives new flavor to the words that he said first to them, Udkhulu Misra insha'Allahu aminin, if Allah wills, enter Egypt safely. You will find a kind of safety here that you couldn't have found in the Bedouin, or in the Bedouin lifestyle, or out in the outskirts, right? So that's a very common way, an interpretation of looking at this phrase and connecting it. Or actually, they haven't connected it, but they've simply said, this is why he brought up وَجَاءَكُم مِّنَ الْبَدْوِ, right? So they've moved on up. But there's other ways of looking at this. And by the way, you don't think that this is condescending. Like, Allah has been so good to me that he brought you out of your rotten, pathetic houses to the palace of Egypt. You got a much better life now, alhamdulillah. Like, it's kind of almost condescending. That's not what's being said here. So, and there's more than that I'd like to add here. There is, of all the things, like I keep saying, of all the things he could have mentioned, he mentioned two. So there has to be a logical connection between these two things. So I was pondering over what could connect him coming out of prison and them coming out of the Bedouin, lands that they were in. You see, the brothers, him coming out of prison is Allah completing his favor on him, right? Allah completing his favor on him, and him now in a position to do good that he wouldn't have been able to do. He's now able to help people against starvation, help an entire nation, and do da'wah on a scale that he could never have done. That's Yusuf alayhi salam. So bringing him out of prison is not just relief from a prison cell, it's actually an opportunity to earn some incredible good deeds in this life, right? So to do more, obviously, if you're in a prison cell, you can't do much. You don't have the opportunity to do a lot of good deeds other than your own worship. The only opportunity we saw is him talking to a couple of inmates, right? Which was a small seed Allah turned into a tree. On the flip side, the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, and by extension, the unfortunate, upbringing they're giving to their families, means they're not doing a lot of good deeds. They're even disrespectful to their father, right? But them coming out of that environment, physically coming out of that environment into this new environment, and them being humbled in the way that they have been, is an opportunity for even them now to do good. For them to do so, he has a chance to do more good, and now they have a chance to do more good, and that's also a favor of Allah on him. That not only am I in a place where I can do good, my family is doing good. You see, when you love someone, you want the best for them, and even if his brothers were bad to him, and whatever else has happened, at the end of the day, you don't want anybody burning in hellfire. At the end of the day, you still want them to turn a new leaf and become better. No grudges are worth eternity in the afterlife. So he's so happy that they have an opportunity now in this new land, away from that environment in which they were so lost in their own power, right? In the Bedouin lands, they were the pharaohs. They were their own pharaohs. But now they're not. Now they have a chance to start fresh and to really have a connection with Allah. And that's also an opportunity for them to see themselves as believers in a new light and to see their future course of action differently, right? So that's another dimension of them coming out from the Bedouin lands. But now let's talk about the connection between these two things. You see, Yusuf alayhi salam here started with Allah being good to him. So there's a few observations here. Allah being good to me. This is the same wording he used when the minister's wife tried to seduce him. And he said, Innahu Rabbi ahsana, same verb, ahsana here, mathwaya. He's provided me beautiful housing. My master has he's done excellent in taking care of my residence. Remember, he had honorable residence in the house, right? Now it's interesting that when he was a servant, he was calling on Allah even and saying that Allah has provided me excellent housing. He has much more excellent housing now. So the time for him to say, Allah has really hooked me up with some housing, was this, right? You would expect Yusuf in the palace to say, wow, Allah really gave me a beautiful home. But actually, Yusuf alayhi salam's mind is so profoundly spiritually connected to Allah that the favor of Allah he sees beyond the material. So even when he was so long as he was safe and he had dignity, he called that a favor of Allah, and he has excellent housing. He has a roof over his head. He has clothes on his body. He's got food to eat and a permissible income to earn. Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwaya. Like he doesn't have to have a palace to say that. And when he does make it into the palace, after all of those struggles, what is he thanking Allah for? Well, he's thanking Allah. He's saying Allah was really good to me, but he brought me out of prison. Why? Because that is not something he could have planned at all. So you see, he's the planner for the entire country. He planned the crops for the country. He plans the security for the country. He planned the entire scheme to reunite his family. He is an incredible planner. That's what he is. But one thing he couldn't have planned is his relief from life in prison. He could not have planned for the king to see a dream. He couldn't have planned for that dream to be so disturbing to him that he says it in public, in front of the court. He couldn't have planned that the same guy would remember at that very moment, and not before, not after, at the moment of that dream, I think I can get that dream interpreted. He could not have planned him coming and asking that interpretation. He could not have planned for the king to say, that's not you, I want to know who this was. He could not have planned that the king would be so impressed with him that the case would get reopened and all. None of that was his plan. That was Allah doing his work. That was Allah implanting a dream into a king's heart in the middle of his sleep in the night, and he can't sleep. The guy can't sleep because Allah has a plan for him. Those dreams have a purpose. So he's looking at the way Allah did something without any of his planning. And he says, Allah was so good to me when he brought me out of prison. Basically, fill in the blanks, from no planning of my own. That could not have been planned by me. That was entirely done by Allah. You make sense so far? Now look at what happens. وَجَاءَ بِكُم مِّنَ الْبَدْوِ. And he brought you from the Bedouin. Allah brought you from the Bedouin lands, or from the outskirts, or from the wilderness. Wait a second. Hold on a second. But unlike the dream of the king, which was done by Allah, Yusuf didn't implant the dream. Unlike all of those chain of events, the chain of events that led the family to come to Egypt were not from the unseen. That was Yusuf putting a cup, calling them back, that entire back and forth twice over. That was entirely planned by who? By Yusuf alayhi salam. But he doesn't say that it was his plan that brought them here. What does he call it? Allah doing that. What does he recognize? Sometimes we plan things and they work out the way we're hoping. Sometimes we had no plans and things work out the way we were, beyond what we were hoping. In either of those cases, we should know it's not our plan that worked, it's Allah that was doing it. It's Allah that made it work. In either case, he's not going to take credit. And he's almost as if he's saying, now the connection between these two. So one is divine intervention. Obviously, there's no intervention from Yusuf and him coming out of prison, and the other was his own intervention. He was taking the planning and the course of action that led to them coming out of Egypt, or coming out of the outskirts. Um, but now the connection between these two, and the connection between these two is Allah had a great plan for me to bring me out of prison. It's important enough that I get out of prison that Allah would put that in the dream of a king. This is more important than myself. This is larger than life. This is larger than my own self. It's not just that I should no longer be in jail. There's a higher purpose. And so far, when we were studying the story, what was the higher purpose? The higher purpose was Egypt is going to fall into famine. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to starve. So lives have to be saved. That's the larger plan, right? And we saw that play out. But now Yusuf alayhi salam sees, Alhamdulillah, Allah has been really good to me when He brought me out of jail. And actually, not only did bringing me out of jail help all these people, it seems Allah's plan to bring me out of jail was to get you out of the outskirts into Egypt. Meaning Allah, just like He had a plan for me to save these people, Allah must have a plan for you, and something remarkably good, that He brought you out of that place into Egypt. The sons of Israel are now in Egypt by some great divine plan from Allah. And just like I didn't know what was happening until it actually happened. I didn't know Allah's plan and how grand it is until I saw a piece of it unfold. This to me is also a piece of Allah's plan unfolding. And just like Him bringing me out of prison was a huge favor of Allah to me, I will have no doubt that you coming here, you families coming here, is also in some way a huge favor of Allah to me. And He doesn't even know the level of truth in that statement because He's just a human being. He doesn't know that this coming of, let me just get ahead of myself a little bit and tell you, them coming here is them getting settled in the land of Egypt and them growing as families and tribes. And eventually, as they grow as families and tribes, they're going to become economically very powerful and influential people generations down the road, to the point, and then there's going to be a power structure shift in the governance of Egypt. And they're going to say, these people are not originally from here. They have too much power, too much money. They need to be taken out. And they are going to be turned into slaves. And when they are turned into slaves, then among them, Allah will raise have a baby be born that is going to survive drowning in a year where all babies are supposed to be killed, and eventually that baby is going to receive the word of Allah, the Torah. That same baby is going to not only deliver them from Egypt, the most important favor to him is going to be he's going to receive the word of Allah. And that word of Allah shall be carried for generation after generation by prophet after prophet after prophet after prophet after prophet. And that entire chain of events is because Yusuf came out of jail. Because Yusuf came out of jail, he was able to bring his family here. That's Allah's plan. He doesn't even know how this is going to play out. And let me tell you how huge that is. That means Yusuf alayhi salam's deeds are going to give him sadaqah jariyah for anyone who will ever recite the Torah for generations to come. That hasn't even come yet. That's part of his sadaqah jariyah. And now take it a step further. The final and the greatest gift of Allah to humanity is the teaching of the Quran, yes? Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. The incredibly, unimaginably loving and caring, He taught the Quran. How much of the Quran is a review of what Allah taught in the Torah, or the prophets of the Torah, or the teachings of the Torah, or the story behind the Torah, which is including what we're looking at now? The Torah is actually this is the musaddiqan lima bayna yadayhi. It's a confirmation of what came before. So actually, even the Quran is echoing the legacy of Yusuf alayhi salam in some subtle, beautiful way. And what good can a person have? What better good can a person have than they have a share in the word of Allah spreading throughout generations? You know, Torah was you can call it the trailer for the Quran. It was the preview for the Quran. You know, in the Quran, Allah calls their book, the Torah, He calls it Al-Furqan. He calls it Kitabullah. In the Quran, Allah describes Torah as Furqan, Kitabullah, Hudan, Nur. These are all descriptions of the Quran itself. Quran is called Furqan, Quran is Kitabullah, Quran is Huda, Quran is Nur. What is Allah Azza wa Jal telling us? That and by the way, the greatest gift comes after the greatest trial, yes? In Yusuf's life, what's the greatest gift? That he gets to bring his family together for much grander purpose. a purpose he doesn't even know yet. But he knows it's coming. He doesn't know what it is, but he knows it's coming. Because this is not something small. He recognizes Allah doesn't just do something Allah doesn't do some good that's short term. Allah always does a good that is perpetual, long term. It may even be long term than my own imagination and my own lifetime. And maybe my generations won't even be able to see where that good leads down the road. I may not be able to see. So he's got this vision of how Allah has done good, and now he's optimistic about the future. So no, in that sense, if you look at these two phrases again, one more time, when he brought me out of prison is actually him being grateful for everything that happened, even him leading up to going into prison, because if he wasn't in prison, he wouldn't be running the country. So he looks at the final piece of that puzzle, which made him understand all of the other terrible adventures, to understand he could not have been in this position if the jail thing didn't happen. And then that's how Allah released him from jail. This is where Allah wanted him. So this is him now looking at the future, at the past optimistically. He's looking at the past and understanding its purpose. Now he's going to look at the future. And the future is, you've come here. You're just starting your lives here, right? We don't know how things are going to turn out yet. You're just starting your lives here. And he says, Allah was good to me when he ended my trials by bringing me out of prison. And I know Allah is good to me by having brought all of you here, which is only the beginning of something beautiful. Right? So it's the past and the future together. It's amazing. These two phrases together, married together like that, are so powerful. Another dimension of that is Yusuf alayhi salam, and look at it from a psychological point of view, and that's more individualistic. There was the grand big picture, but now let's look at Yusuf alayhi salam as an individual who has been lonely and sad, even though according to the Torah account, he got married by this time and he had children, so he has a family of his own. But it's, having a wife, having children, having one relationship is not a substitute for other relationship. I never got to experience what it means to have brothers. I never got to experience the love and care of my father on a daily basis the way I would want to. I never got to serve him. I never got to hear his advice for so many years. There's a void that's there that others can't fill. Every relationship that Allah created in our life, the spousal relationship, the children relationship, the parental relationship, the sibling relationship, every one of them has its own beauty. Every one of them fulfills its own, void inside of us. It's something remarkable that Allah has given each of us that we have a need for. And when it's not there, because many people are yatim, many people's parents abandon them, many people's parents are not on good terms with their children, many children abandon the parents. There are voids left, and there are holes left inside of us. We can still function, we can go on in life, but there is this, there's something missing. And what does Allah say? Usually when you have news like, a child was kidnapped, ma'adallah, may Allah protect our children, a child was kidnapped or a child has disappeared, a missing persons report or whatever. What's the hope? That the child will come back to the family. He's turning to Allah and saying, Ya Allah, you brought me out of jail to kingdom, and then instead of me returning me to my family, you delivered my family to me? What kind of VIP treatment have you given me? How good are you to me that instead of me going back to my family is coming back to me? Look at how this is the mirror image of the words of Yaqub. Yaqub alayhi salam said, Asallahu an ya'tiyani bihim jami'a. Hopefully Allah will bring all of them to me. Yaqub said, hopefully Allah will bring them to me. Allah said, no, I'll bring you to them. I'll bring all of you to him. That's what I'm going to do. He recognizes my father, my honored father, this family. Allah gave me an opportunity to get them to come to me. He made the events turn in this way, and he feels so special in that Allah has given him that. It's also, he feels special that now I have someone who never had extended family, right? Someone who never had cousins and or brothers and nieces and nephews and father and mother, and he's missed out on all of that. And now all of a sudden he's got this extended family. They've got kids there, they've got sister-in-laws, they've got brothers, You've got the dad that he loves so much. Mom has now come. الخالة في حالة الأم في منزلة الأم. He's got this huge family all of a sudden, and he recognizes that as a favor of Allah to him. That all of us have come together is actually Allah's favor to me. I recognize Allah's favor to me. وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ بِي إِذْ أَخْرَجَنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ وَجَاءَ بِكُم مِّنَ الْبَدْوِ. But then he adds, مِن بَعْدِ أَن نَزَغَ الشَّيْطَانُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ إِخْوَتِي. Even after the devil had caused this discord and the devil had caused a provocation between myself and my brothers. He didn't say even after what my brothers did. Look at the language carefully. He says even after the devil created a provocation between myself and my brothers. If you're talking to somebody and say, hey, what's wrong? Shaitan's created a problem between me and my brothers. When you say that, if you say that to somebody, Shaitan has created a problem between me and my sister, me and my brother, or whoever. You don't exactly sound like you're blaming your brother or sister. You don't exactly sound like you're blaming yourself. And actually, if you were to take a hint, it almost sounds like you're blaming yourself because you put yourself first. Shaitan caused a problem between me and them. So who's been brought first? Me. And that's also another layer of making them feel safe. Look, I'm covering for you, and I'm not talking to you about what you did. I'm letting you know that I remember the lesson my father taught me so many years ago, not to tell you the dream because the devil is a real enemy. And I know after all these years, it wasn't you. It was you when you slipped into the trap of the devil. The devil caused tension. The devil caused a provocation between me and my brothers. I'm going to read something to you about the meaning of provocation. I keep translating it as such. So let's read a little bit about the etymology, the origin of the word nazgh. النزغ شبه الوخر والطعن. It's similar to poking or piercing. نزغه طعنه ونخسه. نزعه, the verb, نزغه rather, actually means to criticize someone, to provoke someone. Biyadin, by hand, meaning to push someone or to bully someone like that. Or by a spear, to poke someone in the back to make them move, to agitate them. Kalima, or to provoke someone by means of words. حركه أدنى حركة, to move them just a little bit. المعنى المحوري نقص حسي في البدن أو معنوي للتحريك والإثارة. It actually means to cause a disturbance or a provocation or an instigation that is physical or emotional, to impact somebody psychologically. ومنه نزغ بينهم أغرى وأفسد وحمل بعضهم على بعض. Nazgh also means to incite somebody, to aggravate somebody, and to cause corruption in a relationship where one starts getting aggressive against the other. فهذا نزغ تحريض وتحريش للإيقاع بين غير المعتادين ولزيادة الفساد بين المعتادين. And this is the kind of encouragement, incitement, working, they say rile somebody up, work somebody up, stir somebody up. That's what nazgh actually means. Nazgh is to stir someone up. So they have a feeling, let's make it worse. Let's agitate it. Like, if you have an irritation and you scratch it and it gets worse, that's what Shaitan does. You may have a bad feeling. He wants to make it a lot worse and a lot worse and a lot worse. Shaitan did this until it became a serious disorder between me and my brothers. And by the way, now by calling, he didn't say me and them. He said me and my brothers. Me and my brothers. And in my brothers is also a kind of acceptance. And it's also looking at all the extended family and saying, look, Shaitan tried to do this, but he failed. Because look, you're all here even after the devil tried to do this between me and my brothers. In other words, we're not going to harp on and we're not going to dwell on what the devil had already done. We're going to focus on being grateful that Allah has done a great favor to me, that He brought all of you here, even after me and my brothers had a discord because of the shaitan. Now my favorite phrase in this ayah. Inna Rabbi latifun lima yasha. No doubt about it, my master is subtle in whatever he does. Now, this deserves some attention. This is one of the most beautiful names of Allah in the Quran, His name Latif. Okay, and when it comes as a pair, it comes Latifun Khabir. There are 7 instances of this word or this name of Allah in the Quran. And it occurs once as a verb. فَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ وَلَا يُشْعِرْنَ بِكُمْ أَحَدًا. That's the middle word in the Quran, subtly enough. But the word Latif, there are 6 other places in the Quran where Allah describes Himself as Latif. I'll run through 5 of them. The 6th one, which is Surah Al-Ahzab, I will not run through because that is way too subtle. It would be a lecture by itself. But one of my aspirations, inshallah, is when I finish this series one day of Surah Yusuf, my aspiration is to, inshallah, cover the remainder of Surah Al-Kahf that I haven't finished, and then actually maybe turn to Surah Al-Ahzab, which is just an absolutely profound and different surah of the Quran. But inshallah, we'll get there when we get there. No rush. So listen to some of the ayat in which Allah talks about Himself as Latif. But before we do, let's look at the meaning of Latif from an Arabic origin point of view. هو الذي اجتمع له الرفق في الفعل. A Latif is someone in whom there are certain combinations. The first combination is someone who is very gentle in whatever they do. So someone does something gently. وَالْعِلْمُ بِدَقَائِقِ الْمَصَالِحِ. And as they're doing it, they know the very subtle implications of and the subtle consequences of every step. وَإِصَالِهَا إِلَى مَنْ قَدَّرَ لَهَا مِنْ خَلْقِهِ. And to make sure the effects and the act is done to exactly the one that it is intended for. To help you, to make this even easier, or actually further, نفاذ بدقة أو احتيال مع خفاء المنفذ. And then لطفة, this is صغرى ودقة. Let me simplify that for you. When something penetrates something, when something gets through something, like for example, when dust that you don't see gets through your clothes, or smoke that's very very light can actually get through clothes, get through a surface, permeate through a surface, and you don't even realize it. Particles that you can inhale polluted particles and not realize them, for example. In a sense, for example, we're so worried about the coronavirus and the way that it spreads airborne because it is, in a sense, latif. It can penetrate without one realizing it. It may be doing its work and damage, and you may not feel a poke or a prod until it's too late. You understand? So the idea, when something acts in a way that's invisible, that's not noticeable, it's extremely precise, it targets something, and the act takes place without anybody realizing it. And that's why I keep coming back to the word subtle, but it's not just subtle, it's also gentle. Now, the way Allah uses this word, listen to this. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Doesn't He know who He created? He is Al-Latif Al-Khabir. He is the subtle, the one who has full awareness. Think about, even in the physical sense, how intricate and how microscopic are the neurons firing in my brain right now so I can come up with the syllables to say a single word in this sentence. There's a subtlety in the technology of the human brain and its connection to the tongue, just this much, right? That is beyond our imagination. These systems are so intricate and they're so subtle. When somebody has a brain disorder, when somebody has a heart disorder, what kind of extremely precise instruments does a surgeon need to go and remove that one tiny tumor or that one tiny growth, or remove that one swelling, and that finger moves a little bit, half an inch, a tenth of an inch, a centimeter over the wrong way, and they could kill a person, or they could permanently damage a person, right? So when you have to do something that's so incredibly precise, Allah says, doesn't He know who He created? As if to say, every last detail about who I am and what I go through and what events are happening in my life, every last minute of it, every last second of it, every glance to where my eye falls, every sound that my ear hears, Allah is fully aware of what's going inside of you and what its consequences are. Allah is fully aware of what thoughts are happening inside of you and what its consequences are. That is Allah being Latif. That is Allah being Latif. And then He says, لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار وهو اللطيف الخبير. Eyes cannot conceive Him, but He conceives all the views. He conceives all the eyes, and He's Latif, and He's fully aware. In other words, He's so subtle, I have a hard time seeing things from your point of view. You have a hard time seeing things from my point of view. Allah says, I own every point of view. And when I speak, it is so delicate and precise because I've taken every point of view into consideration. وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. ألم تر أن الله أنزل من السماء ماء فتصبح الأرض مخضرة إن الله لطيف خبير. Didn't you see that Allah sends water from the sky and the earth becomes green? Certainly Allah is Latif. The earth becoming green. If you ever seen like those sped up videos where they keep the camera in one place and the blade of grass comes out, a single blade of grass, a single leaf going through photosynthesis, turning green, its pigmentation turning green, and the process that it goes through is entirely engineered by Allah Azza wa Jal. He is Latif over every ounce of greenery that we see on this planet was single-handedly crafted by Allah Azza wa Jal. It was exclusively done by Allah Azza wa Jal. How subtle is He that He colored every vein of every leaf on every tree? How delicate is that? How delicate is that? When I was little, I was obsessed with drawing trees, but trees are hard to make if you want to make a nice one, and your hand gets tired, and the first few leaves come out really good, and then they start getting uglier. Or if you're really good at, if you're a perfectionist with crayons, when the crayons start getting thick, you start coloring over the lines, and it gets annoying, right? And kids, when they say, "Oh, I want a coloring book, I want a coloring book," and you get them a coloring book, and 3 minutes later, forget it. Like turn to the first page, wow, work of art. Second page, did you go back to kindergarten? What happened here? You know, and yet with Allah's art, with Allah's nature, what He does on the earth, with every seed, how subtle is the process of a seed tearing open and a plant coming out? What is happening inside of the earth that we have no knowledge of? All we do is put the seed in, put the water. That's our part. Who's tearing it open? Who's making that precise surgery take place inside of the earth where life can form, where this plant can form, which can eventually feed? Inna Allah latifun khabir. My favorite one, Ya Bunayya, sorry. إنها إن تك مثقال حبة في خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأتي بها الله. My beloved son, even if there is a seed of mustard, small seed, and that seed is somehow lodged deep inside of a boulder. Use your imagination. A boulder is a giant piece of rock, yes? And deep inside that boulder, there is a seed, a delicate little seed. Okay. أو في السماوات, or that seed is lost somewhere in the galaxies. أو في الأرض, or that seed is hiding somewhere on planet Earth. يأتي بها الله, Allah will bring it back. Now think about a boulder and think about a seed inside of a boulder, and you're told you have whatever tool you want at your disposal. I want that seed, and I don't want it damaged. I want it recovered from this boulder undamaged. The thing is, we have powerful tools in the world. We have bulldozers, we have explosive devices, we have cutters, we have all kinds of things that can powerfully dismantle even a boulder. We can. But the more powerful something is, the less subtle it is. The more powerful a weapon, like a bomb is, the less precise it is. The more precise something is, the less powerful it is. You can't be powerful and subtle at the same time. If someone is really strong and you told them to super muscular, you told them to squeeze a toothpick, they're too strong to even be able to squeeze it. Every time they try to squeeze it, it snaps. Because they can't control their strength. They're too strong for it. To be strong means you lose subtlety. You lose precision. Allah Azza wa Jalla is Latif, and Allah is all-powerful. All at the same time. He says in this remarkable ayah, Allahu latifun bi'ibadihi. Listen to how this ayah begins. Allah is subtle when it comes to His slaves. Allah is almost invisible in the way He plans things out for His slaves. Allah is very gentle in the way He nudges them in the right direction for His slaves. يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. He provides whoever He wants. وَهُوَ الْقَوِيُّ الْعَزِيزُ. And He's the mighty, the ultimate authority. It started with Him being subtle, and it ends with Him being mighty. He's being the all-powerful. He is both at the same time. That's Allah. Earlier in the surah, you saw in the surah of Yusuf alayhi salam, Wallahu ghalibun ala amrihi. Allah was dominant over every one of His situations. Allah was dominant, overwhelming over his situation. Allah cast a shadow over all of his situations. And now he says, my master has always been subtle and present. Nobody else may have realized it. I may not even have seen what he was doing, but he was always there. His presence had always penetrated every situation I was involved in. He says then, Inna Rabbi Latifun lima yasha. If there's something I've come to learn, is Allah is very subtle in whatever He wants to do. Allah is not so obvious that this was Allah's doing. He makes it very invisible. You barely notice something's happening and it's actually happening entirely from Allah's plan, but He's keeping Himself like Allah describes Himself, وَهُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ. He's the most obvious and He's the most hidden. So He's very hidden, very subtle in what He does. But the verb here is so beautiful. He says, لِمَا يَشَاءُ. He is subtle in whatever He wants or He may want in the future. In other words, I have come to know that Allah is extremely subtle. I am a living example of the subtle plans of Allah that nobody else could have foreseen. But that's given me confidence that you coming here and me and my family settling down in the land of Egypt and trying to do good in this land of Egypt and hopefully spreading the word of Allah in this land of Egypt, that perhaps there is some subtlety, there's a subtle plan at play that we cannot sense. But I know one thing, Allah has always got a plan and He's always at work with something. كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. Every day He's involved in some important matter. Every moment He's involved in some important matter. So when He says this, it's as if He is forecasting that some remarkable things they haven't just happened, they will continue to happen. Allah hasn't just been subtle so far, Allah will continue to be subtle. And boy, is that going to come true as we study the Quran and study what's going to happen with the Israelites. And it's as if the rest of the history of the Israelites is captured inside Inna Rabbi Latifun lima yasha. Now go back. When father heard the dream from his boy so many years ago, the father was, jubilated. He was so overjoyed. He was so happy, and he interpreted that dream to mean that Allah has chosen you. You remember that? And He will complete His favor on your entire family. And now He's saying, my entire family's here. And then He said back then, at the end of that ayah, He said, Inna Rabbi alimun hakim. Certainly my master is all-knowing, wise. And Yusuf alayhi salam at the end of this ayah, so many years later, says Allah has been very subtle. He is, in fact, the all-knowing, the all-wise. He echoes the words of his father from the first time he heard the dream. Allah told him Allah knows and Allah is wise. Whatever Allah does, He knows what He's doing. He knows things we don't know. And whatever He does because it's a wise decision. We may not be able to see its wisdom, but it's always going to be a wise decision. He's looking back at all the events that have happened, and He says, not only do I look back and realize Allah knew all along, and Allah's wisdom is being opened in front of my eyes, now I know to look ahead into the future and always remember that Allah knows and Allah is wise. Sometimes when people ask, where's Allah? How come He doesn't help? How come He doesn't change my situation? How come He doesn't do this? And how come He doesn't do that? You must remind yourself of this name of Allah. Inna Rabbi Latifun lima yasha. My master is so subtle. He's so gentle in what He wants. And He knows. He's wise. He's the ultimate. He knows like nobody else. The Al-Alim kind of creates this, this infinite attribute towards Allah, as if to say He knows like no one else does. He's wise like no one else is. He makes decisions like nobody else can. Only He can do what He does. He is Al-Alim, Al-Hakim. So to be this gentle, and to be that gentle, knowing full well exactly, like surgically, exactly what steps need to take place. What two inmates need to be next to him? What time will the food arrive? How much time will he have to have this conversation? Every one of those seconds, every one of those moments, every one of the bites of that meal, every one of them calculated to precision with the subtlety of Allah. Latifun lima yasha, innahu huwal alimul hakim. Every one of them. Can you imagine? They call it the butterfly effect, right? But can you imagine a conversation that happened in a prison cell changed the fate of humanity when it comes to guidance? Like that conversation that he just had with a couple of guys before lunch came in a prison cell. That created a chain of events that eventually leads to the coming of the prophet that is most talked about in the Quran, Musa alayhi salam. All of this. And then not to mention that Allah is so subtle, He understands something. His mentor, who's Yusuf alayhi salam's mentor? Yaqub alayhi salam. Allah is so good to me that He brought all of you here, because if you didn't come here, I know my dad would never have come, leaving you behind. He feels responsible for his family. So Allah brought not just my dad to me, He brought all of you to me. And now my spiritual mentor, my senior prophet, is with me, and he can guide me even better on spiritual matters, and he can maybe even guide me on how to give the beauty of this deen not just to his children and their extended family, but now in this new land to these people. Allah has made them prosper for a reason. Allah would want them to have Allah's guidance too. And now I have the support of my father, the mentorship of my father. Allah is so subtle in how He plans things. Inna Rabbi latifun lima yasha. It also kind of helps you appreciate the role that Yaqub alayhi salam played in his life. You're going to see that one little conversation that we saw in the beginning echo over and over again in the conversation that Yusuf alayhi salam is going to have, this monologue that he has towards the end. We have one more ayah left of the story itself. The surah, as you might know, is 111 ayat. And we're going to be ending up, I don't think we can do it in one shot, but we have ayah number 101, which is the final part of the dialogue or the monologue that Yusuf alayhi salam says. It's actually a prayer. In all of that, so he turned to father, he turned to the family, and the surah is going to conclude as he turns to Allah. It's really beautiful. There's three conversations. Conversation with the father, conversation with the family, and now there's going to be a conversation with Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's actually what's going to happen next in this final ayah that we're going to study. May Allah Azza wa Jal help us extract every benefit we possibly can from His profound word, and may Allah Azza wa Jal make us grateful and appreciative of His subtle presence, His gentle presence in everything that's going on in our lives. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ni wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikri al-Hakim. Which way to go? Which way to go? Okay, fine. I'll do the standard. I'll make it more interesting later. This is good enough. That's good enough.